So hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for this talk, Walking Your Authentic Path. I'm going to leave the title up for a minute or so that it's at the beginning of the video, and then I will make myself visible. And this talk, Walking Your Authentic Path, I'm going to speak somewhat about my own path, not because anyone necessarily cares all that much about the details of my life, but because it's representative of the talk. In other words, there's reasons why I am giving this talk on this topic. And I feel like at this time, our planet is in a waking up state or phase, despite some of what goes on outside that seems discouraging, that we actually are waking up. And the path of waking up it's not a well-trod path, and there can be a lot of insecurity, uncertainty, questions, and so forth along it. The point of the talk for me is to validate and support everyone on their own individual unfolding, and to affirm that we are on the right path, the steps that are intended for us to take based on the way that we feel inside. To me, I point back very much to intuition as the important piece. I'm going to stop this title right now. Okay. I want to start with a brief intro about myself, because I practiced evolutionary astrology, what you might say, by the book for 12, 14 years. And life began bringing things into my life that had me, I guess I would say that my focus became more on growth and self-affirming rather than astrology as a be-all and end-all in itself. This occurred over a period of 4 or 5 years. Excuse me, I have something in my throat. I was in transition, I still am, but I was in transition for a long time, and I wasn't sure. Life was remaking how I approached astrology. Over the last couple of years, and especially recently, I've gotten a better handle on how I am intended to use it at this point. I have a very high regard for evolutionary astrology. I also feel a lot of what I have learned is that so many paths, teachings, spiritual paths, modalities, astrological paths, and so forth in this world subliminally have remnants of our old ways encoded in them. Why? Because we're all conditioned that way. When I say we're waking up, I mean we're waking up out of our conditioning. When I started talking on the Zoom channel here, I wanted to talk about soul and growth, and most of the talks are about astrology. And I wasn't sure if I was in the right place. Linda greatly encouraged me to keep talking, which I have. And the gist of it for me is that evolutionary astrology is about the astrology of the soul. So I have a good reason or justification, if I need one, for talking about soul within astrology. Because to me, it's about the growth. That the essence of the astrology is for us to grow. And a very big part of that growth at this point in time is healing, because most of us that are sensitive, that are attracted to spirituality and astrology and healing and so forth, are sensitive people. And as such, because of the amount of dysfunction, emotional dysfunction that is in the world, we have been affected by this, from family structures, which we have taken into, adult life, and attracting partners who somehow mysteriously represent our early childhood conditions and so forth. Why? Because we're after healing. We are healing. And more, I look at the entire point of my life, of everyone's life, at a core level is, at this point in time, healing. And we are on that path. Now, what are we healing from? The first, an important part in what I'm going to be speaking about is that I feel like what we're waking up to is that our actual identity is a soul. We are aware that there is a soul. We believe that there's a soul. But most of us, including me, still predominantly identify as our personality, as our ego. And this, I feel, is what we're waking up from. In other words, I would say the majority of people feel like I'm a person that has a soul, where the actual reality is more like I'm a soul that has created a person as part of my growth. And this is what I feel the waking up is about. Now, part of the conditioning that we have received is the concepts of that the reason we are where we are, to some degree, and all the pain and difficult things we experience has something to do, must have something to do with my bad karma, with the way I was in the past, that I'm making up for this, that, and so forth. This permeates various forms of it, permeate pretty much everything at this point in time. And what I am discovering and talking about is, well, that's not necessarily the case, not the way that we feel it. That in fact, the difficult things that we experience are because our ego, our sense of identity as a person, is unraveling in our time. Because the time of awareness on earth for souls to acknowledge their soulness is very much beginning and is at hand. And this is what we're going through. And it's particularly intense right now because of certain transits that are going on. I call it the ego, but it's sort of the same as a persona or a personality or a name. It's your incarnation, it's your name, it's your family, it's what you were taught. And it's not like this is going away and we're going to get the heck out of here as fast as we can because somehow I'm going to be done with all the pain and never come back and all that sort of thing. It's in beginning to understand that sometimes the painful things are necessary for our soul growth, not any sort of punishment, no sort of punishment, but they're simply expedient ways for the soul to move forward. And that they can be very painful and difficult to the personality, to the ego. And yet, it is for the soul and from the soul. And that soul is tender, and all of those on the other side, guides and angels and whatever, are there supporting and helping us through the difficulties. Because the difficulties are us releasing our conditioning. And we're very attached to who and what we're conditioned to be. At the same time, we have an inner impulse that that we know. Those of us that have known, well, I'm here to do something different. I'm not here to do what people seem to do in general. And there are a lot of issues from that because I don't know, a really good example of it is the children's story about the emperor's new clothes. I think that's a great allegory, where a couple of what you might call con artists have convinced the entire kingdom that the emperor's getting these wonderful clothes and so forth. And some little child calls out, "Mommy, the emperor's naked." And the entire place goes crazy. So in some ways, and because it was a child, it's a very innocent statement. And we're innocent. At our core, we're innocent. And we're just trying to live innocently and trying to follow what we feel is right or best. And obviously, you get a certain amount of flack for this from various people as a result. Now, one of my big lessons in the last couple of years has been I have dealt in my life with a lot of feeling insecure about my worth, my value, my right to be as I am. And yet I also very much want that and have, it's been important to me for a long time. And so it's kind of this dual archetype inside between claiming authority and then feeling guilty or uncertain about the very authority I'm claiming. So what's been a very interesting realization for me in the last few years is that the reactions that I get from someone when I have blown their mind or rocked their boat, they really have nothing to do with me. My response to this, because when somebody says, you're this or you're that, or I don't agree with that, or you're, or worse, this has made me feel very insecure about myself. And I have tended, my style has been to fight back, to defend, to point out, what about you? You're doing this, and so forth. And what I have discovered is that what they're saying is not really about me at all. And I have my own version of this inside of me. So I say something that blows somebody's head, like, whoa, and that they get triggered because they have been touched in a place they don't allow themselves to be touched. And so they then start to get defensive because it causes them to feel insecure. Any anger is covering up the insecurity. So defense. The reaction I've had against them, I have discovered to my astonishment, is not, they didn't make me feel the way I feel. I mean, I had known these concepts, but this has been getting real. There are triggers and unhealed triggers and wounds in me that are set off by what someone responds back to me with. And the most amazing part to me is I have realized that when stuff is going on, when emotions are going on, when I'm feeling really uncomfortable, those feelings are actually coming up so that the healing can be brought to them. Because my basic response has been to get as far away from them as I could, as quickly as I could. And lo and behold, I discovered that the healing of those feelings isn't simply being okay with feeling them. this is going to underpin the rest of my talk, because in order to feel good about walking our authentic paths, we need to learn how to feel at least okay, if not good or great, about whatever's going to come up along walking our authentic path. Because when stuff starts coming up as a result of taking a step in our authentic path, especially for people that are not fully set on that path, but are like stretching into an unknown and feeling a little uncomfortable or insecure about it, it can be very easy to start doubting oneself and what one is doing. I want to, where did I put this? I want to read, for one, I lived in New England for 30 years, and 20 years ago, on my own authentic path, I was having Pluto over my ascendant for the astrology people, which at the time I didn't have any idea what that meant. I do now. When I first moved out to Oregon, and I got hold of Joseph Campbell book, which really helped me at the time. And there's certain quotes that I want to start this with that were very valuable to me. The dedication, his quote of the dedication of the book I took these from is, "The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are." The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. I'm actually beginning to experience that in my own life. That is, from the perspective of the soul basically puts forth a person because the soul wishes to have certain experiences that occur in the physical. And in order to have those experiences, it needs a person. So thus we're born. And the important part of walking the authentic path has been my realization. I think I had it in my write-up. I was always trained from birth on, you kind of fit in to whatever is going on. You have a family, that family in many cases, because out of love, out of caring, they want you to grow up a certain way because that's how they know to express caring for who you are. You may not be that way, but you're expected to be that way. And when you're not that way, in many families, there are repercussions from, really getting in trouble with it, or just kind of the love or validation, acceptance gets turned off or turned down. And as young kids, we almost desperately want that love, acceptance, nurture. And we're willing to make a lot of shifts in order to sustain having that experience, which can compromise our actual authenticity at times. So my realization of late is 7 billion people, we are all utterly unique, utterly unique. I have a certain perspective. Nobody else has the perspective I have. There are people whose perspective is similar to mine, or mine is similar to theirs. This is true for everyone. Each one of us has a unique perspective and unique gifts that no one else has. And when you get right down to it, if I am not actualizing and expressing my unique perspective, it's not actually occurring in the universe because no one else can fill that space. Whether my unique perspective is going to be of value to 3 people or 30 people or 3,000 people or 32 million people is kind of part, and from my perspective, is kind of part of the destiny of a lifetime on a life plan. Nonetheless, my unique perspective by my very existence in having a life is of value to other people. No matter how much I doubt or have doubted my perspectives, they have affected certain people. They're intended to be affected by my perspective. Similarly, for every one of us. This does not mean, oh my God, I need to get out there tomorrow. I've been slacking off and not doing what I'm supposed to do and all that. That to me is the essence of what I now call the old paradigm, because this perspective is without guilt, no guilt, nothing wrong. We have never done anything wrong. This is one of the places that I put a slightly different slant on things as taught in astrology, like, you know, when it starts talking at all about, well, you're in the place you have because you didn't get it together in past lives, or, you know, you didn't complete your skipped step. And there's sort of an underlining tone behind that of a certain kind of morality, like good and bad, and, you know, you messed up and this is your opportunity to change that. And I take all that, tear it in half, and throw it in the trash, because that is not it. We have always been exactly where we were intended to be. If it's taken me 13 lifetimes to learn something, it's not because I should have done better. It's because it took 13 lifetimes to learn something. And life does not have a judgment on that at all. Life is thrilled with each and every one of us exactly the way we are, including in our doubt, uncertainty, insecurity. Life is so on our side. This is a change of perspective that is very different than the conditioning that many, many people received. And I will say that it's that moving from feeling self-judgmental and self-guilty into a more accepting and loving sense of self is a process. It's a process, and it can take a long time, but it's slow but steady, because as moving into it, one starts feeling the changes percolating through their subconscious, through their mind, through their emotions, through their body. Slowly but surely, things start to change. Part of this is, along that path, a lot of uncomfortable, unwanted, disliked, disowned emotions, memories, experiences will and do surface. Now, in the old way of looking at it, I know I've felt it myself, and I've had many people, you know, express it to me. I was making some progress, and, you know, I felt really good about my life. And now I feel like I'm been backsliding, and I'm kind of falling back into the same old thing, and I don't like it. And I certainly have experienced that myself. And I want to say now that I now see there's no such thing as backsliding, because it's more like I've had enough healing go on that I can now handle a deeper level of my wounds. And because of the safety that the parts of me that feel wounded are feeling, they feel safer to express more of their woundedness, hurt, anger, sense of loss, feeling not worthy, and so forth and so on. And anger at self, at others, whatever. They come up. There is no backsliding. This is a perspective, an interpretation of experience. My point is that I have realized there are many different ways one can interpret the same experiences. It's kind of like when you hear about an accident with 6 witnesses and the police have 6 different stories. We can have our own, we can change our own perspective. I don't even like using the word story because I feel like that's become a very loaded term. We have absolutely needed to be and go through every single experience that we have. We have done nothing wrong. We are healing. Back to Joseph Campbell. Another one I love. You enter the forest at the darkest point where there is no path. Where there is a way or a path, it's someone else's path. You are not on your own path. If you follow someone else's way, you are not going to realize your potential. I'd like to update that a little bit because I guess it's true that you're not going to realize your potential, but you're not, I would say, you're not going to find yourself. You're not going to find your own authenticity. Now, again, I want to remove any sense of obligation, duty, mistake, error from this, because we all do as much as we can at any given time. We have the right to be human, and we get overloaded sometimes, and it's okay. The last Joseph Campbell quote, which I think is kind of cute. As you proceed through life following your own path, birds will shit on you. Don't bother to brush it off. I think that's very wise. I know that for me, at times it's very painful to feel like people aren't getting what I'm saying, or it's not of interest or whatever. But I just realized that is not about me. I am simply to put forth whatever comes to me to put forth. And those that it speaks to and find value in it will do appear in my life and take value from it. And those whom it's not for, it's not what they need, don't. And that has nothing to do with me. I can get better. I have gotten better over time at refining how I'm saying what I'm saying so that it's more on for what people are looking for. And that's a refinement that occurs over time. But it started from having the courage to just stand up and do it. And in my case, in the beginning, I received support from others that were encouraging me to start. And I think that's amazing. And basically what I say is, if you're in a point where you're stepping out or wanting to step out and make the changes, and you have people that are supporting you in this, that are encouraging and validating, that's who you want close in your life, in my opinion. Because it takes courage to make these changes in these steps. And it's very easy for people to, it's really easy to criticize and point out shortcomings, and you could have done, what about this and what about that? And it has its place for sure. But as we're moving into the unknown, where we don't necessarily feel so secure in the first place, we need support. We're going to get better at it as we do it. That's a given. Let me see. I'm going to share a little bit, Lindsay, of what you wrote to me, or some of it, parts of it. I've struggled, because I'm going to put your chart up now. I've struggled what I feel like has been my entire life to fully embrace my uniqueness. I think it's safe to say I was the black sheep. I never wanted to conform and was pretty vocal about it. Growing up, I often experienced feelings of isolation and a lack of connection with family, friends, and community. She didn't have much faith, in other words, religious training, because her father didn't want his kids to have to go through what he had to go through growing up in a strict religious home. The other side of her family had a connection to Yogananda, who was a big influence in Jeffrey Wolf Green's Evolutionary Astrology. Um, she thinks she spent a fair amount of time looking for adoration from her father or father-like figures. And I want to say to that, what I have been learning, because I've been in a pretty important and not always easy relationship myself for 5 years, that I've gotten a huge amount of growth out of. That this may be obvious to many of you. I'll just repeat it. That it turns out there's a natural connection between young girls and fathers and young boys and mothers, and this stuff shapes us for decades and decades. From the psychology point of view, they look at it as wounds and a certain healing that comes from that. And there's something to be said for that. But from the soul point of view, I just realized more and more, it's exactly as it's intended to be. It's exactly as it's intended to be, and it is not a punishment. That it's part of us finding our connection to ourselves. Many of us that are on the paths of healing and astrology, spirituality, from my perspective, are here at this time wanting to contribute to the changes that are going on the planet, the necessary changes. In order to be able to be here, we had to move into a family. And the conditioning that we experience and unraveling the conditioning that we experience is what allows us to relate to human beings. Many of you, I'm sure, have experienced that the way you think, look at life, understand is not that common in general. Not that many people really get the depth of where you're coming from and how you think. And because many of us who have this sort of sensitivity, I've heard it described as it's kind of like the opposite of a narcissist or a superiority. That the sensitive, empathic, spiritual people tend to have an ego defined by inferiority, less than. A lot of this is empath or absorbed from people around who don't feel great about themselves, but have been able to develop masks or covers or personas where they kind of try to hide that away to compensate for what they're actually feeling. We tend to feel what people are actually feeling, and we tend to take it on when we're feeling it, thinking it is about me. Some of it is, some of it belongs to others. So my point is, Lindsay goes on saying she's been working a lot of that stuff out. Her husband is 11 years older than she is. And it's because of transit, which we're going to look at, the last few years have been difficult. And yes, she's pondering whether it's time to let go of the relationship. That's important, obviously very important. her husband, she says they have 2 kids and they do the day-to-day stuff like a champ. And when she starts going into the realm of astrology and alternate universes, that is out of his realm of, he's not there. She's had, let's see, she's had several careers. She's done some other things of trying to find her conventional career. She's done some other things trying to break out of that and find her own path. And she's at the point where she's ready to see what's coming next. So at this point, I'm going to put up Lindsay's chart. And we'll talk a little bit about it. And I can see I need to open it here. Let's see. All right, I'm trying to I'm trying to navigate my computer desktop and sharing a file on Zoom. Just a second. Okay, I want this. There, very good. Okay, so here we have Uranus, Pluto in the 11th house, both retrograde. I want to say, if you have Pluto, Uranus, South Node, significant planets in the 11th, even one, Moon, in the 11th, she doesn't have that, but in the 11th house, you're different. Get used to it. Just the way it is. You're not here to be doing what others are doing. And a way to look at it is, you're actually here to help advance the collective, to advance the world, to advance humanity in a way, small or large. And you don't necessarily even have to do anything because you're just breathing. The way you look at life, you're just breathing and walking around and saying hello, and what radiates off of you is affecting the world. In addition to that, we see she has Sun, Mercury, and Aquarius in the 4th house. An interesting place for Aquarius because of the association of Aquarius, especially with 11th house, with trauma, and yet it's emotional house. And so part of the work, or before I even get into that, here we have a South Node in Libra in the 12th house. I'm a South Node Libra person myself. If you have a South Node in Libra, most of the time, starting off, at least, you're not going to feel that secure or certain about yourself. Your tendency is going to be to, we're 7th house planets, your tendency is going to be to check in with others, to compare and contrast your experience with the experiences of others, to make sure that what you're doing makes sense to them. Having this in the 12th house is to me is a sign of a very sensitive person. On top of that, in case there's any question, we have Mars in Pisces, conjunct Chiron in Pisces in the 5th house. This Mars in Pisces, another signature of being very, very sensitive. In the 5th house, that's a Leo house. We see a Leo's moon, actually. But in the 5th house, we see Mars in Pisces and Chiron right there. This says to me that past experiences of trying to find, express from power, personal power, have run into a lot of resistance, Chiron, creating wounds and fear. I see the Leo moon in the 10th house. That is, of course, the Capricorn house. We've got some conditioning going on there. That moon has learned to temper itself based on the preferences, shall we say, of the family of origin and then in the world itself. And yet, we've got a deep conflict going on here between the Pluto-Uranus, Sun and Aquarius, really wanting to express, and the other side that has well-justified fear. And this would be an internal, ongoing, those two parts have something to teach each other, I'd put it that way, and they don't necessarily go together smoothly. Lindsay, if you want to get on here and comment a little bit, you're welcome to.
Sure.
And I picked this because I felt like this inner conflict or back and forth between the different parts of self is pretty common. The astrology signature would be different for different people, but many of us have this inner conflict between this sense inside of, I need to do something that expresses me, that moves things along a little bit, that's more real to myself, and then my fear about doing that. The backlashes, the things not working necessarily the way I would like them to, what I'm learning. That's why I thought this was a good chart, because I think most people that are trying to have lived in a way and are still trying to find their own authority are going to have similar internal places that kind of conflict with each other. Lindsay also has Scorpio rising, and her Neptune is in Scorpio in the first house, which is just a further restatement of the Piscean themes we have in the rest of the chart. So this is, it's big, it's up front here. My perspective, I deal with this myself, my perspective on things like, your relationship and the future of it and all of that. I feel this is where I bow to the intuition and the natural timing of things. I know my ego or personality, wants a definitive answer about many things. I have a good week. Oh, this is great. We've solved these issues. I have a bad week. What this says to me, I'll put it this way, is a personal example of mine. I was in a marriage, it's been 20 years, more than 20 years, but I was in a marriage that was very difficult. I was with the woman, we had one child, 18 years, and we each wanted to be out of it at different times. And it never quite felt right, but it was really hard. And I didn't know anywhere near what I know now from back then. And all of a sudden, one day, something happened, and it was simply, I just knew inside it was time. It was the time for me to move on. I was super clear. And after years of this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, it was like, oh my God, this is just really, really clear right now. No, I'm not suggesting everybody's experience is going to be exactly like that. But my point is, my realization is that there's a natural time for things. Here's the thing. It's our ego, our personality. And when I say ego, I don't mean that like in spirituality, ego kind of gets a bad rap. Okay? We're supposed to get over our ego and all that. The best definition I've recently heard about ego is it's like an immature version of where the soul is going. It's like a child soul. And the ego is doing the best that it knows how to do. So if we can look at those parts of ourselves sort of like a child, like we don't really know what we're doing, where we're going, all this. And some of it is just doggone uncomfortable and drive you crazy at times. And part of that, because of the greater shifts that are going on, part of that is that, let's say that the relationship between ego and soul is shifting. This is my opinion. And in the evolution of consciousness on the planet, the relationship between ego and soul is shifting. The ego is not comfortable with this. The ego has functioned, our fight or flight response, all that is essentially our ego. These experiences have kept us alive. That thing is always looking out for what might go wrong, trying to keep us safe. It's done a really good job. We're still here. And it feels inside like somehow its role is changing, and it's really uncomfortable with this. I put a picture on it. I got an image a couple of weeks ago and explained it like this. I don't know if you remember like all this talk from decades ago. I guess it's coming back about how automation is going to replace all these jobs in offices and things. Like we're going to be replaced by computers. And it's kind of like the ego senses the soul is coming in, and the soul is going to be directing what goes on. And the ego is going, well, what am I going to be doing? And it's like, my job, if I don't watch my step, my job is going to be eliminated. And so the ego is running around trying to prove to the boss how invaluable it is. You can't do it without me. You'll never survive. You'll never make it. Now, the gist of it is, it's not really that the ego is going to be replaced. It's that it's going to evolve. Because we're going to have a persona, a personality. But we don't have to do everything ourselves. The gist of it is the universe, life, our soul, is directing all of this. This is the part we don't get yet, generally speaking. That because most of us have lived like, I have to be in control of everything that's going on, because if I'm not, oh my God, what's going to happen to me? Because many of us have had experiences we have felt as very difficult. And we have felt kind of we're on our own. When you have a 1 degree Scorpio rising, my hunch would be that some of the experiences that you've had that have been painful, you have experienced as like betrayals, which is a very Scorpio archetype, which is not to say they weren't, but it's that is an archetype that is very deep within that soul. You're in the Neptune and Scorpio generation. There's a lot of it. Here's the thing, evolutionary astrology will teach us that one of the 12th house Pisces archetypes is disillusionment. What that essentially means, it also talks about exhaustion of separating desires. I feel more and more desires really are from the soul. So it's not so much that we have separating and, well, I don't want to say it that way. It's not so much that we have two kinds of desires. We have a mix of desires, and they're all necessary. It's not like getting stuck in separating desires is something bad that's slowing down our evolution. It's absolutely essential for our evolution. And we're simply having those experiences. The disillusionment leads to realizing this isn't working the way I thought it was going to work. It isn't working the way it was presented to me. And I'm being brought down to earth, so to speak. This isn't fun. I don't like it. You have absolutely every right not to like it. The other side of it is the realization, if you look back 2, 4, 6, 10 years at various disillusioning or painful experiences you've had, you can start to see in there, oh, well, I've grown because of those experiences. Oh my gosh, I could actually say honestly that I wouldn't be where I am if I hadn't had those experiences, even though they were not easy. And my point is, that's the point. Because when we start looking at life from the perspective of the soul is having certain kinds of experiences. Some we find enjoyable, some we find excruciating. But that is how the soul is teaching itself. Now, what we humans have tried to do, and it sells a lot of product, is to create realities where I can have more of the good stuff and less of the bad stuff. Now, the first problem with that perspective is we're labeling experiences as good and bad. They're neither good nor bad. They just are. It's not wrong to call them good or bad. That's the way we experience them. It might be better to say, painful and pleasant, but that's a personal experience. The experience itself is neither painful nor pleasant. It's just what it is. I experience it as painful or pleasant. The irony is some people could experience the same thing that I find as pleasant as really painful, and vice versa, because it's very personal based on their own past and their own experiences. Starting to see things more from the perspective of the soul comes down to, well, everything that happens in my life is for my benefit. Everything. I'm not going to like some of those things. I don't have to like them. It's not required that I like any of it. But I can develop an appreciation for the whittling away process, which is really what it is. It's I'm getting the image of a block of marble. This famous image about the sculptor, sculpting, revealing the hidden beauty that's in the block of marble because the sculptor sees it. Well, we can call life the sculptor. I came up with a very interesting perspective a week or two ago. It's the Plutonian perspective, because I've been hearing about the caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly, like all my life, right? I got, a couple of weeks ago, I was like, I've never considered this before, but what do you think the odds are that the caterpillar is screaming at God? We don't think about that. We don't have to like it. We're not even intended to like it. It's not pleasant on the human level. But as we can really move into the space, more and more of realizing that everything that happens in our life, in reality, is a gift. Every breath is a gift. I'm not saying, I live in this state maybe 10% of the time now. Increasing it makes a big difference. But I have a lot of conditioning that looks at it any way other than that. But literally, that's what I know what Joseph Campbell meant about being you. Where is it? The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. It's amazing. You get to go, each one of us, we get to go through all these experiences. Think about your life. Think about our life as a movie. And all the stuff that happens in the movie, and a lot of stuff in dramas is not necessarily fun, and yet we're drawn into the story. It's amazing. We're living a movie, and we don't know how it's going to end. We don't get to read the script. Let's think. I just want to see. I want to see if Christine is here. I don't see her. She was the other. Is she here? I don't see her. She was the other volunteer. So I'm just going to stay with yours, Lindsay. I have another quote because we brought up the marriage piece, which I recently encountered, which it just blew me away. A relationship is not a place to have your desires fulfilled. I mean, a whole lot of us move into them for that. Oh, it's going to be great. Life's going to be great now. A relationship is a place for you to meet yourself in the presence of another. And, when you have a partner that whatever static is between is arising, they also have witnessed a whole lot of a person that nobody else sees and probably would put up with. And again, that doesn't mean that that's necessarily, or this is what I should stay with. It's kind of like honoring that place. So my feeling is you're in a lot of change. And excuse me one second.
I think the wind chimes agree.
Yes, I had to close the door. I meant to do that before, but I forgot. You're in a whole lot of change, and it's really uncomfortable at times. And our personality or whatever, at times just wants to throw it all off,
Yeah.
And it may in the end be that. But my feeling is, and it's okay to wonder, to not be sure, to wonder, to be going back and forth. But it's not time to make a decision, because if it was, you would have a decision. And so part of this is learning to live in the uncertainty of the moment. The ego doesn't like this because it wants in or out, up or down, day or night, because it feels unsafe in between. This is where our learning to trust life, that life is on our side, is really important. Um, and this comes over time. What I'm suggesting, what I'm trying to communicate here is a perspective, a different perspective than most of us have received or viewed life from. Because it's the perspective itself that changes our experience. This is what I've found. And it's not mental. It enters as information. It then percolates and permeates into our subconscious. It's kind of like being able to accept uncertainty, paradox, duality all at the same time. You know, I was referring to what I see in your chart, like the two sides of you.
Mm-hmm.
One part that wants to move forward, the other part that is like, well, I don't know. And I know I've had this, and it's been kind of like this, you know, butting heads. And I would say that what it is actually learning how to integrate them, because they're two voices and they each have a valid perspective and valid needs. So if we rush ahead faster than all of us is ready to go, then we're literally creating trauma, because that's what trauma is. It's like a fracturing. And the healing is oftentimes it's a slowing down that's needed, especially now, especially with that. I don't have the transit chart up, but Lindsay is having the Pluto South Node Saturn conjunction basically on her Venus, and you know she's feeling relationship stress, of course, and it's taking. Remember also that Venus is, you know, our relationship with ourself. So it's the changes. I would say one thing that's going on because of the Venus in Capricorn is that a lot of conditioning about relationship is breaking down. In other words, however you have viewed this in the past, it's not going to be the same. You don't know how it's going to be. In terms of, I wanted to comment, in terms of your partner, you know, is he okay with you exploring what you're exploring?
Oh yeah, he is. He just doesn't get it. He's like, I'm trying. I'm not there. I'm much slower on all this. So, you know, little bits and pieces. I just have to make sure I'm not trying to like shove it all down his throat. Like, you need to understand this.
And are you,
you know,
okay?
This is the way.
Are you okay with that? Does that work? Are you okay that he doesn't meet you in that space?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. The only problem I ever have is when I think I get triggered when he makes fun of it. And I know that it's because he's not sure. It's unsettling. It's an attack on his structure, his beliefs.
Exactly.
And I'm getting much better at recognizing that instead of feeling hurt and rejected. I'm understanding that it's not that, it's that he is feeling threatened by it, or it's so different for him. He just doesn't know what to do other than make fun because it's not like what he knows. So that's the only time we ever struggle with it, but it's better.
You understand that. Yeah, and that's great. And you know, what I would say from my experiences, because I personally I would get triggered from someone making fun of what's really important to me, that's my growth. And so it like gives an opportunity. I'm learning to look at triggering as actually, it's an opportunity.
Me too.
Me to learn to feel, to deal with what I feel and not react back. And you're right, you're threatening his boundaries from where you're going. And you know, there's a beauty in if you can both that you're both okay, reasonably okay with that. That's beautiful. We have, I guess, a few minutes left. If anybody has any questions or comments, at this point, feel free to chat them to me. I'll address them in the last minutes of this talk. I want to talk a little bit about people pleasing, which is very much not part of walking the authentic path, which a whole lot of us do. If you have Libra, you have a very, very good likelihood of people pleasing. Oh, I see. I'm being told I can go as long as I want. All right. There. People pleasing is not walking the authentic path. And it's very, very common. So this is what it comes down to. The opposite of people pleasing is not telling other people off. I am finding that, how do I put this? People ask us to do things. People who are kind and spiritually oriented tend to want to help and tend to take on things that we may not exactly feel drawn to. The way I have been learning to look at it is that there's such a thing as a contract, more or less, in any situation. In other words, a really good example would be someone, whether a partner, a child, a friend, a family member, that is basically has some problem, emotional problems. And everybody knows that they have some problems, and people do what they call enable their problems. Because they care about them, because they don't want to say no, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the gist of it is, I don't want to use an extreme example like drugs or alcohol issues. Let me think. How about a child, teenage child, that is not really taking on the natural responsibilities that should be coming with being a teenage child, is still wanting their mom to kind of baby them or treat them like a younger child. This is a good example. So particularly for a mom has a nurturing mom heart. Mom was like, oh. And as an act of what mom feels is love, is doing stuff that part of mom knows she shouldn't really be doing, or she wishes, maybe she doesn't even know she shouldn't be, she wishes the child would get it together. And that's not happening. And yet the mom keeps doing the stuff for the child. So when we look at this objectively, On the one hand, it's the motivation in the mom is to be loving. That's why they're doing it, because they genuinely love the child. But at the same time, the mom gradually starts feeling a growing resentment rising in her, because it's like, I shouldn't have to be doing all this. That's people pleasing. Now here's the way we look at this. And this is part of a reprogramming of the way we look at things. Because anything that I'm to act on, this applies not only to people pleasing, but everything. Anything that I'm to act on, I'm going to feel something inside that says, this is for you. This goes, for example, leaving a relationship, starting a business, leaving a business, and many things that are much smaller decisions than that. I either feel it or I don't feel it. As a culture, we are very much motivated by obligation and duty. That's the source of people pleasing. This is in the air. This is like kind of an addiction that is socially acceptable. And so it's actually considered loving. But if I'm doing something because I'm supposed to, not because I want to or feel to, I am people pleasing. The gist of it is, if I'm doing it and I don't really want to be doing it, that's where resentment starts building up inside, right? Yes? And furthermore, it means I'm not the person who's got that job. As we start moving more into this self-definition and self-honesty and self-authority, I had an image about this a long time ago, which was early on, was as I started moving into understanding what's actually asked of me by life, that it was like listening to a police scanner radio. And there's like all sorts of different messages going over that scanner. And a few of them had my name on them, and most of them didn't. And my job essentially was to sit there or walk around, whatever. When my name wasn't called, I didn't have any obligations. I wasn't responsible for what other people were being called to do. I'm going to put a corollary on it right now. If I felt like I was supposed to take on something for somebody else, that's different. But if I don't feel it's right for me, I don't have that job in the universe. So even though I might think it's loving to do the job, I'm actually not following what's intended for me. Because sometimes that person is not supposed to get what they want fulfilled. Their growth requires them not having it fulfilled, because that's going to bring up certain emotions in them that are there for them to heal. And this becomes a root of codependency. It's like two people making an unspoken commitment to wanting to take care of each other's needs. The underlying side issue going on that's typically ignored is there's a certain amount of mutual control involved in this. It's kind of like, I'll scratch your back and you'll scratch my back. Then it becomes, or it can often go to, well, I scratched your back 4 times and you only scratched my back twice. You owe me. There is no you owe me in the living life as a soul, in an authentic life. There's only what's right for me to do. Now this is really big. In terms of our relationship, because this can rock some relationships, it goes back to, a relationship is not a place to have your desires fulfilled. A relationship is a place where you meet yourself in the presence of another. And what this means to me is two people, the deepest commitment two people have is that I commit to always honoring what's necessary for your soul growth, the deepest part of you. If that means someday you're going to walk out unilaterally, I'm going to be in pain, and I will support that. And believe me, you'll go through a process learning to support it. But it's a place inside where it's like that's the deepest place that we can be to support each other's soul growth, because we're being together during a period of time when it's supporting our soul growth. If it stops doing that, then we're kind of holding on to something that doesn't really have a basis anymore. Now, there are interim periods. Have you been in the marriage a long time?
Yes, we've been married for 23 years. And what you're saying is really spot on, because 2 years ago he left. He just texted me one night and said, I'm not coming home. And he was gone for a year. And, you know, and it really was something that I don't think I felt like I could do myself. But after going through it, I can see how I'm such a better person, and our marriage is way stronger, and it's exactly what, you know, each soul needed to go through in order to heal some stuff and learn some stuff. And yeah, it's amazing. Like what you've said is just
Yes.
exactly how it's.
That's life from the perspective of the soul, which means there's some painful stuff that happens.
Yep.
But as we begin to be able to view it not as something to duck, but that it's not bad, it's not wrong. I mean, you can be very angry about it at the time. That's totally valid. I mean, it's kind of like having your whole world turned upside down. But that's part of integrating those emotions. And it's kind of like for him, which, I mean, I don't know what happened. I think it's likely what I'm about to say occurred. It comes back and he can understand, I assume, that what he did created a lot of pain for you. And
it's very hard for him to reconcile that part because he's extremely sensitive. He's a sun, moon, Cancer, and he left because we were so unhappy and it was so chaotic in the house, and he didn't have that safe place. And
yes.
He felt like I was always angry with him and I was always resentful.
Yes.
And he felt it so much. He's like, I just needed to get out. I needed a place just to think and like not feel under attack all the time. Yes. That's why he left.
Yes. And I will say, you know, just from little aside, but it's somewhat relevant from my own personal experience and growth. There's definitely this place in a lot of men, especially a Cancer man with that, where they're in the marriage for their own unresolved mother issues and leading to the partner as at times as a de facto mom. And it seems like sometimes they have to get away from it in order to grow that part of themselves up.
Yeah.
And then
I can see that.
And then it changes.
Because I'm that fourth house son, I do the mom thing like no one's business. I take care of people and things and cook and make things nice. And it was, I'm sure, very eye-opening for him and good for him to just be on his own and not have someone take care of everything for him.
Exactly. And he was actually supporting his growth in making that move, even though he didn't consciously perhaps look at it that way. But that's exactly what he was. And the strength of what you have in your marriage is that it can come back together again, and both honoring what needed to occur, which would be pretty painful on the human perspective. That's soul growth right there. And that to me is a really big part of walking the authentic path, because we can learn to view whatever is coming our way, whether I like it or I hate it, as somehow, and it takes time to accept things that are really painful and I really hate. And there's no time limit on how long that can be. There's no wrong way to do it. It's integrating everything that occurred into a more cohesive whole. And my piece is that what we're really doing through doing that is moving towards having a more conscious awareness of our soul as the essence of who I truly am. So even if your husband doesn't, I mean, you didn't say that, so I don't know, but even if he has no idea what that even means, that's what he did. He doesn't have to know what it means. He did it. That's what's important. So as we, I want to say, I guess I'll start winding down. But in terms, oftentimes people are feeling or thinking about, well, what do I do now? What comes next? Actually, I got a few things to say. I'll get back to that one. With everything that's going on now, I mean, the energies now are just, to me, are through the roof. Let me take down this chart and get back to stop share. The energies now for everybody are through the roof. This is amazing, amazing opportunity for growth is going on for everybody on the earth. And everybody is going through that, even though the majority of people don't understand that that's what they're going through. And we're all being stretched, particularly now for the next period of time. I mean, it's been in 2019. And it's just opportunity. And there's nothing that we have to do to embrace that other than breathe. If you're breathing, you're embracing it. If you're open to it and you desire that, then you're going to perhaps move ahead a little more. But if you're not open to it or don't understand it, you're still going to move ahead. It's going to bring things up. We're going to deal with them, and we're going to be integrating them. Anything external that doesn't serve anymore, jobs, relationships, people die. Anything that doesn't serve anymore is being broken up. Things will be disappearing. Houses will burn down, all kinds of stuff. And all of these things are not terrible calamities, but necessary in somebody's growth. And this is the change that I find. The more of integrating that everything that's going on is helping, everything that's going on is helping growth. Everything, no matter how comfortable or uncomfortable. And the corollary to that is that everything that I like at some point is going to end, and everything that I don't like at some point is going to end. And this particular moment right now, whatever that is, it's supposed to be there. There's periods that are harder. They tend to be periods where there's actually more growth going on. Another piece is that many people, with that transit you're having on your Venus, many people now really require a lot more downtime. There's a lot of time needed. If you're a Capricorn kind of person, this go, 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 go. It feels foreign. There are way more downtime than usual is needed because we are integrating a whole lot of change. I came up with a cute saying the last week about that, which is that it's about resisting, say it again, resisting rest, not resisting arrest, resisting rest. I like that because it's easy to remember. Because many of us need a lot of rest now, way more than typical. Are you finding people that get sick, have accidents, whatever, because they're immobilized for a period of time, because they really need the downtime, because we are evolving very rapidly right now, and there's a lot that needs to be integrated. You know, the different sides of you that I was referring to, they're integrating. We want our different parts to become friends with each other instead of combatants, because they each have something to offer. Another great saying that I have heard is, I move forward at the speed of the slowest part of myself. If I have an active Mars, I'm going to go. But if I have a tender Pisces or something like this, it needs more time. Or 3 planets in the second house, Taurus house, it needs more time. And if one part of me is rushing off and the other parts of me are, I don't know about this. And people call this like pushing yourself. I have come to detest that term. We do not need to be pushing ourselves. I'm going to move when I'm ready to move. And if that results in 13 astrologers telling me I'm resisting, great. That's what I need to do. When I'm ready, I move. I need to get on a good term with the feeling of fear. Just because I'm feeling fear doesn't mean that I need to be afraid. But I can feel fear. I mean, what it does, because I saw recently, I've been absorbing a lot of interesting stuff lately. 95% of the stuff that we worry about never happens. And of the 5% that does happen, 95% of the time, it's nowhere near as bad as we worried about it. And so it's kind of like learning to be okay with feeling uncertain, uncomfortable, but acting anyway. When I know it's time for me to act, I act anyway. I don't have to feel fearless and all this. I just keep moving forward little by little. In terms of your chart, I've already set up, but I'll review with that. You can be okay. You can find a place where you're okay with not knowing if the form of your relationship is changing. And you have Pluto on your Venus. What is it? In Capricorn? Is that right? Where's your chart?
That's correct.
Venus in Capricorn with Pluto on it. The structure of your relationship is changing. Even the fact that your husband left for a year ago, was part of that transit.
Right.
And because the structure needed to change. So again, from the way I'm looking at it, all structure changes are good. But they're unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. The gist of it, you two are going to love each other no matter what happens. That's what really matters. The rest is like, do I live in Florida or do I live in Canada? I mean, those are the details. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. I'll wind down with this. Again, especially with Capricorn kind of people, because people want to start things. I want to change. I got to move. I got to start things. We will know inside when it's time to start something without pushing. In other words, sometimes that ego that's trying to keep its job, look what I'm doing, boss, you need me around, is trying to move ahead of time. A good way to think about this is seasons of the year. We have distinct seasons of the year. Even if you live in Florida or Arizona, you have seasons. And they come at the right time. And there's nothing you need to do to make summer come, because you just, all you have to do is survive, and it's going to be summer again. So it's time. Again, you know, the ego wants a yes, no, all this. And sometimes we're in between. And that's when it feels really uncomfortable. So it's kind of like learning to be okay feeling uncomfortable. And it can be gathering your thoughts. Well, here are some ideas I have. I might do this, I might do this, I might do this. But it's not really time yet, because if it was, I would know. So just kind of being with it and living it. So that, I feel, is a good stopping place. Yeah. So we will stop there. I will be back, I think, in about a month, talking about I don't know what yet, but it will be some other theme along this line. Thank you all for joining me on this afternoon. I hope you have found value in what I've been speaking about.
Thank you.
You're very
It
welcome.
was very validating, very helpful. The whole thing, it was great. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad. Thank you. Bye, everyone.